Welcome to the Forge, my wanton wildlings. I'm your creepsmith, and I hope you like my work. Welcome back, wildlings. Well. Drugs and religion, tech and politics, race, ethnicity, and opinion. Ain't that where all this fantasy starts? Once again, we're back with 9Mother9Horse9eyes9 and the Flesh Interface series. Little word of warning: if racism, the black Hebrew Israelites, or violence give you pause, this one may not be right for you. Just saying. 51st post. The War of the Mind is Lost, aka Q, Reality's Virus. User has logged out. General Castillo is gone. She made a real flash narrative. She was clever. She got a lot farther than any of us had any right to. But Q smelled her. Q slew her proxies. Q localized her. Q funneled her paths to one: disconnection. It hurts. She was the last of the bread, our best hope. The ultimate soldiers fighting in the final war. She and the other children were supposed to be the answer to Q, but there was no answer to Q. Now there never will be. Not after 10 trillion heat deaths. Not if every particle in the universe became a transistor and they all cycled together, and the stones themselves cried out. The war of the mind is lost. We lost it. Now begins the plague. The plague of the flesh. 52nd post. I can't explain how it just snatches you up. I'll say it. Hitler did the right thing. You know what he did? He came busting up into people's houses, snatching them out of their houses, killing them. But that's because the so-called Jews in Germany were selling weapons to America to go to war against him. So he did what he had to do. He had to check them. The people in Europe who call themselves Jews are not Jews. They're the Rothschilds, the Khazars, or the Khazarians, or whatever they're called. They say they're Jews, and are not, but they do lie. And there wasn't no Holocaust. They just said there was to get control of Israel. They sold arms to America so they could get the land of Israel. You want a real Holocaust? What about 100 million people killed in slavery? What about 100 million Indians killed in the New World? That's a Holocaust. What happened in Europe? That wasn't no Holocaust. You can disagree all you want. 5 years ago, I'd have disagreed too. I used to go to that church every Sunday and worship that white Jesus, just clapping and singing praises with the rest of them. Oh, hallelujah, go down, Moses. But that was before I knew my history. My wife taught me my history. Before I met her, I didn't know nothing about this, but she was so full of knowledge and beautiful, and everything she said made so much sense. She taught me that Jesus was black, that the Israelites was black, that God was black. What are you going to do when you get to heaven and God's black? When you see he has a face like mine, hair like mine, you'd be surprised? I was surprised too. Oh, you'd be surprised that he even exists? You're gonna be real surprised. You believe in evolution? No, the world is not no millions of years old. It's 6,000 years old. And you can follow the history of our people from the beginning of time, through the deserts of Egypt, through the Roman Empire, across the oceans on the slave ships. You can see how God has tested us, how we survived, because we're special. We're his chosen people. I learned all this from my wife before we got married. In the Bible it says the man is the head of the household and the wife should submit to the husband. So I was young when I got married, but I had to be a man, A man's wife is sent to him by the Lord, so I had to be a man for her and learn a trade, how to work with my hands, put food on the table. We had 2 kids. You didn't know I had kids? Yeah. Little girl and a little boy. My babies. I was daddy and head of the household, but that's when it got me. You ever seen New Jack City? Remember Pookie? He'd be like, shit is calling me, man. Be calling me. That's real. That's the way it is. You could be doing anything. At work, reading the Bible, playing with your kids. But if you hear it call you, you go to it. It don't matter. I can't explain how it just snatches you up. It makes you move. You could walk out your door one day, just get some fresh air, and you don't come back for a whole week. Everything gets into motion, into play. You'll sell anything. Phone, laptop, car. All gone, just like that, because you want it. You're on a mission. I used to see the streets in my mind like a maze, like a grid, and I'd just walk the streets, turning those corners, just moving, looking for something. I'd see buildings behind buildings, alleyways, lights coming on in empty houses. I'd hear noises. The sounds of cars coming up behind me, whispers, people talking about me, shadows. I was looking for it, but it was looking for me, searching for me. Like Pookie said, it was calling me. I was supposed to be the head of the house. I was supposed to be a man. One day I come back to the house, been out for a few days, and everything was gone. My wife, my babies. While I was out carrying on, they left. That was 4 years ago. I saw them on Skype once. The scripture says, what God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. But I guess I did put it all asunder. I thought she betrayed me, but I know now that it was my character defects and my addiction. That's why I'm in this program. I'm going to stay sober. I don't care if you see me crying. I know that I'm going to be a man again. I have to become a man again because God joined me to my wife and made me a man in His image. I'm not going to defile His temple anymore. After they left, it took more. It took more of me than ever. I lost the house and was staying in my car. Then I was staying at a shelter. Then I was just out on the streets. I was always moving, watching. Things happen out there that nobody knows about. They think nobody cares. And nobody cares. You might see a van pull up and some guys get out. If you look like I looked, some basehead, they don't even care if you see what they do. They're Nephilim. They come to our side of town and feast on the flesh of Israel. I watched them, the children of fallen angels. I saw what they did, what they built. I never want to see that again. 53rd post. Tired of these damn anti-Semitic Jews. Quote, love and tolerance of others is our code. Unquote. Page 84. Giant crock of shit. It's not often you meet a black Jew. It's even less often that you meet a black Jew who believes in Jesus. And it's that much rarer to meet an anti-Semitic black Jew who believes in Jesus. That's gotta win you some kind of fucking prize. That's like a unicorn throwing a no-hitter. And to be roommates with an anti-Semitic black Jew who believes in Jesus? What a treat! What an absolute delight! Don't you love it when a disagreement over laundry turns into a 30-minute fact-free lecture about the end-of-days FEMA camps and the mark of the beast? Christ. Just anti-Semitic black Jew for Jesus things. I don't think I'm going to make it living in this sober house. I can't live with this nutcase. The house manager says I'm supposed to be open-minded and tolerant. Should I be tolerant of some of the most odious and insane anti-Semitism I've ever encountered outside of a Nazi rally? I don't know. I'll concede that it is possible that he could become a cool guy if he only stopped believing in everything that he believes in and believed entirely different things. That'd be a good first step. The real problem is that I hate AA. I fucking hate it. It has the same old bullshit magical beliefs as any cult. They pretend to be open-minded. It's just a bait and switch to convert you into believing in God. The entire program is nothing but let God make you sober. That's it. That's the entire program. Yeah, they try to distract you with all this pseudo-systemization, 12 steps, 12 traditions, and triangles, and diagrams, and slogan, and little self-help exercises, but that's just all a bunch of numbers and jargon to hide the essential emptiness of the program, to hide the fact that it's centered on a God that doesn't exist. The idea that this is the go-to program for helping alcoholics is fucking appalling. It's a fucking crime. It's like getting cancer and going to the best hospital in the country, and then the doctor hands you a voodoo doll and tells you to sacrifice a chicken. You'd sue him for malpractice, wouldn't you? They should be fucking ashamed of themselves. To prey on people in such a vulnerable state, pretend that they're gonna help them, and then try to convert them to their stupid fucking magical beliefs. It's a crime. I mean, everybody thinks the true Jew, Hebrew guy is nuts, but it's not like their philosophy is any less bullshit. At least he's upfront about being religious, and he sure as hell isn't trying to convert me. He told me that white people are the children of Esau, we're Gentiles, but we can still get to heaven if we aid the children of Israel. I let him borrow the charger to my laptop, so I guess I'm covered. 54th post. Pulling a long-term occupant, everything goes smear. A moment ago, one of your technicians placed a small pellet under the skin of my forearm. Within 10 minutes, the pellet's wax coating will melt and release a cardioplegic into my bloodstream, stopping my heart. You must cut it out. Hearing this, I breathed a sigh of relief. There was something unsettling about her face that made me believe that she'd tell me something urgent and terrible. But this was typical occupant talk. Like many of them, she believed that she was still inside the feed narrative. You've been disconnected. This isn't a feed. There's no pellet in your arm. Your name is Karen Castillo. Do you remember? Scan my arm with the ER, she said in a bare, cracking whisper. You'll find it. Karen, do you know why you're in this bed? I've been disconnected. That was a strangely lucid answer. It didn't make sense. If she had been forced disconnected, how did she know that... Hey, we got 2 more calls to get to, one of the techs reminded me. Yeah, okay, pull her, I said, stepping back. A pair of techs hoisted her tiny, doll-like body from the hygiene bed onto our gurney and covered her with a sheet. Please, she croaked, just scan my arm. What did she say? asked Ricardo, the lead tech, as we rolled her out onto the bedrock apartment's narrow, almost lightless hallway. It's a feed dream, I explained. These guys were looking at me to be the expert, so I had to act like I knew exactly what was going on. It was best to go ahead and get to a medical center and address her physical needs before we started countering her delusions. Until then, all I needed to do was be reassuring. Under no circumstances could I encourage her delusions. We rolled the gurney down the hallway into the elevators. Karen was making little croaking noises. Her voice was almost totally useless after 24 years of disuse. Her face seemed extremely disturbed. Someone was standing at the elevators, already waiting for us. It was just Ellie and one of our techs. I hadn't noticed him leave before us. "I got an elevator coming," he said with a little smile. Even though the apartment building was a 300 cube, it had old-style cable elevators, and they came with the frequency of subway trains. Thanks to Elian's thoughtfulness, one was arriving just now. I gave Karen a friendly smile. "Don't worry, no one's going to hurt you. You're completely safe." She managed to gasp a couple of words, which I barely heard. "Elian, There. She had known another one of our names. How was this possible? It was hard to sort through the implications. Did she have access to our records? Maybe dispatch was wrong about how she got disconnected? The elevator let out a ding and the doors opened. There was barely enough room inside for the gurney, me, and the 3 techs. Elian stood on the other side of the gurney from me. I looked him over as the doors closed and the elevator began to descend. Was she saying that this guy put a poison pellet in her? It was strange that he would be a part of her narrative. Very strange. I didn't know much about the guy beyond his name, but I'd worked with him a few times. He was just one of the rotating techs. Young guy, military hair and goatee, skinny but pretty fit. I wondered how he'd be in a fight. These younger guys had so much supplementing, it was hard to tell. Elian caught me looking at him and gave me a bit of a surly look. For some reason, this irritated me. "So, friend, you trying to get out of here before the rest of us? You got a date or something?" I asked, needling him. "I was just getting the elevator," he said quietly. He didn't seem to like banter. Well, whatever. I looked down at Karen and noticed something. A small red spot on the white sheet that covered her arm. Blood. Must have been from where they took her blood sample. Who took it? Elian? The spot was really too low on the arm for that. Odd. I thought of taking a look at it, but one of the most important protocols when dealing with occupants was not to act like you believed their delusions, even for a moment. You must insist on the reality of reality. I realized that Elian was watching me. I casually looked over to the elevator panel to see what floor we were on. 238. Man, this fucking thing was slow. What was the deal with that spot? It wouldn't be out of place for me to wonder about some patient bleeding. I lifted the sheet and took a look. There was a small puncture wound a few inches above her wrist. "How did she get that?" I asked. One of the techs just muttered about not knowing. Elian didn't even look at the spot. His face was blank, unreadable. I touched her arm and felt a small nodule under the skin about an inch from the wound. Interesting. I stood there trying to process this, caught between two realities. Was I in an elevator on a routine call with a stable client and a few techs who were just ordinary acquaintances? Or was I in an elevator with a murderer and a woman who was on the brink of death? There really was no way to split the difference on this one, no course of action that would work for both cases. Fuck. What was I even asking myself? There was no way. Simply no way. Stuff like that never happens in real life, but it happens in the feeds all the time. It's a 100% typical spy narrative bullshit. How could I let myself get caught up in some feed fantasy so easily? But still, a nodule under the skin? There was no good explanation for that. Elian turned to me. We looked at each other for a long, silent moment. I couldn't read the expression on his face. It wasn't chummy goodwill, whatever it was. I felt a twinge in my stomach and my body began flooding with adrenaline. I could feel it radiating out into my limbs. Fuck. My time in the Marines had taught me many things. Many of them were useless in the normal world. Many of them useless outside of a bar or a cat house. But one of the more useful ones was that I should trust my adrenal gland. It meant that my paranoid lizard brain understood something that my snotty intellect was too busy to notice. It happened when things were too quiet and a certain car kept following the convoy, when somebody was acting funny. There, in the elevator, I almost reached for the grip of my rifle. I wasn't wearing a rifle, of course, so I just scratched the front of my chest, trying to keep my fingers loose. Elian put his hands to his hip. Just like that, I was leaping across the gurney. I grabbed his wrist with both hands, but it was an awkward angle, with me splayed over the gurney, and I had no control. A silver pistol came out of his pants, still halfway in its holster. "Help! Get him!" I shouted as I slid off the other side of the gurney toward Elian's feet, holding on to that wrist for dear life. I heard shouting everywhere, but nobody helped me, and nobody got him. Now I was on the floor, wrestling with Elian. There was a lot of awful, terrible fumbling. The four hands were grabbing and clawing for that pistol. Somehow my head was jammed between Elian's shoulder and the wall, and I couldn't even see the gun. I could just feel the metal. There was a shot, painfully loud. Elian shouted. Was I hit? Now the gun was wet. I managed to wriggle my fingers around the grip, and with one huge, twisting jerk, I put the muzzle against Elian's face. "No!" I pulled the trigger. A shot, and his head kicked back against the wall, the mouth popping open. Everything went still. His hands were still holding mine. 55th post. Along came an old crone. The people were moving along the river, as the people do in the gentle days, moving from one fruitful place to another. Mayad played the flute, first a river song, then a berry song, then both mixed together, and it was so flowing that the people began to laugh and shout. Resh slapped his chest and called out the names of the fathers and the deeds, and it all flowed so well that we almost didn't see the old woman in the thornflower bushes. She was an old crone, huddled up in the bushes, naked and covered with cuts. All the music fell away at once, and the people gathered around to take a look. She was very old, far into the barren years, maybe into the years of being carried. I did not like the look of her right away. She did not have a face of the fathers and of the people, but rather the hungry, untrusting face of one of the wandering strangers that we sometimes met along the river. Even when strangers were friendly, they did not know the names of the fathers or the deeds except for maybe a few, but they did not say them properly or with respect. Other times they set upon the people, killing and raping and committing all manner of hideousness. I was always glad to see them go on their way, leaving us alone with the mother river. Some of the older people tried to talk to the crone. She knew some of the names of things, but she said them wrong. I went away from the crowd and looked out into the rocky land. I had a feeling that maybe she was not alone, that there were other strangers with her, ready to set upon us. The land seemed to be empty. Some of our cats were with us, crouching and sniffing around, and they seemed unworried. Still, I showed my chest and made signs of war in case anybody was among the rocks, watching us. Rima saw me making the signs and laughed at me, saying that she saw some lizards making signs of surrender. I made a few signs of courtship towards her, but with a snarling face she ran off, giggling. Somebody called my name. I came back to where the people were gathered. Someone had given the crone a cloth to cover herself, and some of the women were putting good lucky mud on her cuts. I didn't like this. Why should we waste anything on a barren old woman? Somebody had called me because I was the son of Ariad, one of the great men of the people. The crone had called on all the great people, the leaders of our people. She wanted to show us something. I didn't like this either. Who was this useless crone to call on all the great people? The crone was talking to our great people. The way she said the names was all wrong, but her voice was like strong music, and her eyes were very large and powerful, and she moved her hands, making all sorts of unknown signs. The people listened to her closely, and I found myself listening with them. She said that she was the daughter of the river. She did not have a mother and father of the flesh, but her mother was the river alone. I scoffed at this. The stories of the deeds tell us that the ancient people came from the river, but this was long ago, and they were not strangers who came from the rocky lands alongside the lizards. She went on talking, saying that she was living with the Painted Backs, a friendly group of strangers that we had met before, but that they had all been set upon by another group of strangers, and the other strangers were powerful and cruel, and they carried all the Painted Backs off except her. This was how she had ended up naked in the thorn bush. The people murmured at this. When had it happened? Just the night before. This was worrying. Maybe the other strangers were still around, waiting to set upon us. The crone asked the people to take her with us. This started more murmuring. She was a stranger, not one of our people, and she was an old crone. She could never become a person by birthing one of the people, nor could she work hard for the people. She was useless. Mayed, the flute player, spoke up and said that we should show her the kindness of the people, the same kindness that Mother River shows to us. Are we not useless to the river, who was here before us and would be here forever? I liked Mayed, who was close kin, but he liked talking and impressing people too much. Now we were in the gentle days and things were easy, but what would happen in the dry days when everything needed to be saved? And who would carry the crone when she could no longer walk? The fathers did not perform the deeds so that we could carry old crones around. But I did not say this because I am not good at talking, and my words would seem weak compared to Mayed's, which glittered and flowed. The woman began talking in her strange way again, saying that we should take her with us because the Mother River would bless us with many things, as she was the mother's daughter. Now, some of the people began to scoff like I did, saying that this was not according to the deeds. The crone agreed with this, calling these people wise and saying that some of the deeds were secret. This started more talk, which started to lead toward argument when the old crone suddenly strode right into the river, held her hands up, and called for everybody to watch. The people became silent. The woman reached down into the river, searching for something. After a moment, she pulled her hands out and showed us, dripping and shining in the sun, 3 very large river clams. Waving the clams around for us to see, the old crone claimed that this was proof that she was the blessed daughter of Mother River. Many of the people snickered and muttered the names of the fathers. Everybody knew that these were the gentle days, and it was easy enough to reach into the river and pull out clams. The woman was just a filthy old trickster. We should leave her and move on. "Look!" the woman cried, and she handed the clams to the great men. "Look inside." Our Uncle Kel slipped his thick yellow thumbnail into a clam's mouth and pulled it open. The people pressed around him to get a look. It was a nice clam with healthy meat, but clinging to the shell was a large, perfect pearl. The women all let out little sighs, and the men murmured. Other great men pulled open the other 2 clams, and they both held even larger pearls, all 3 perfectly round. At this, people gaped and shouted, and everyone began talking at once. A man might go a whole lifetime only seeing 1 perfect pearl pulled from the river. 3 was a thing that had never happened before. 3 was a thing that would live among the deeds. "Take her with us," one of the women cried, and soon most of the people were saying this. I found myself saying it as well. The woman was surely a part of a powerful flow, and it was best not to swim against her. But even as the great men agreed that this woman would become part of the people, and we all cheered and shouted the names of the fathers and the deeds, I found myself looking at her strange, hungry face, and wondering if she had not somehow slipped those pearls into the clams herself. Yeah, people talk a lot about addictions to substances, but addiction isn't always about a drug or about booze. Sometimes it's about other needs. Sex, hate. You gotta watch out for those too. So until next time, my wildlings, stay scary, lay off the sauce, and make the most of your nights.